It's my distinct pleasure today to welcome you all to our next segment, a fireside chat with Adam, entrepreneur and our managing partner, Somak, who you've heard from already. Adam started his entrepreneurial career as the founder and CEO of Igniter.com. Igniter was a dating website focused on connecting groups of single people and started in Boulder, Colorado in late 2007. The website Igniter could help people arrange dates, a movie, or group dinner, making early interactions between younger people less awkward. The company took a turn when users started signing up really quickly, only they weren't signing up in the Lower East Side where Adam and his co-founders had been buying drinks to enlist them. No, the fastest growing segment of user signups came from India, compelling Adam to relocate there a year later. So at one point, that company had over 2 million Indian users. So Adam knew Somak and me way before our ventures here at ASV. And now he leads Team Coco, a podcasting and media unit for Conan O'Brien. Adam, it's always so much fun to see you.
Thanks for having me. It's fun to see you too.
So let's start by hearing about Team Coco. What's the company's mission and what have you been working on there?
So we are, like you said, a media company. You know, we're a comedy-first media company, really inspired by our fearless leader Conan and his sensibility, which we sort of loosely describe as the intersection of smart and silly. And for us, you know, in order to build a successful media company, we've had to figure out ways to scale beyond just Conan, because even though he is has an insatiable work ethic, there's only so much Conan to go around. And so in order for us to really build our company, we've had to spend the last couple of years finding other comedic talent that we feel like shares the sensibility but allows us to scale and create more content and, you know, and experiment in new media as well.
And it started as a unit for Conan, but then you expanded out, right? A little bit. So tell us about that. There are now a number of other comedians on the platform.
Yeah, so I mean, the company has started a number of years ago, but really at the very beginning, it was a marketing arm for the Conan's late night show on TBS. So it was really a YouTube distribution company where the clips from last night's episode of Conan on TBS would get pushed out to a YouTube audience, often being seen by, you know, a much larger audience than the audience that saw the episode on linear television the night before. And that alone, that marketing arm became a small and growing profitable company. But when I came on board, I worked closely with Conan and the show's longtime executive producer, this guy named Jeff Ross, who's been there from the beginning. And we decided together that if we were going to grow this, we had to do more than just, you know, repurposing clips. And my background is in audio and Indian group dating, but also in audio, and so that was one of the areas that we looked to first. And so we launched a podcast with Conan about 2.5 years ago. Saw a lot of success with that. Even I think we all hoped and do well, but honestly, it exceeded our expectations. It became a huge hit, and from there, we were able to launch additional podcasts with other talent, with people like Rob Lowe, Nicole Byer, Andy Richter, and launch them sort of off of the back of Conan's podcast, which is essentially like our flagship show.
Yeah, and so it's really interesting that you've been working on this now. I mean, 2020 was such a difficult year, and humor is one of those things that helps you past, you know, tough times, right? So now nobody can meet in person. And so how has that affected your listeners? How are they responding to what they're hearing?
Well, I mean, honestly, at the very beginning of the outbreak, it was a little frightening to be running an audio first company, because when people's routines changed, their listening habits changed. And so absolutely like, when people stopped commuting, and when people stopped leaving their house to go to the gym and started trying to figure out a way to work out, around their kids, it became harder and harder to listen to podcasts. I can speak from experience. My podcast listening dropped dramatically at the beginning. So that was a concern, but over time we saw the numbers climb back to where they were originally and actually exceed them. I think people figured out a way to work podcasts into their new routines. As for the actual content, I mean, we always consider ourselves to be essentially like a respite or an escape from the world. A lot of, and that comes from Conan. A lot of other comedians and late night comedians have kind of ventured closer and closer toward like the newsy side of comedy, which is, no right or wrong, but you could, some late night hosts, almost their programs almost feel like you're watching Rachel Maddow at times. And for Conan, he's like, he doesn't think he's the most qualified person to be delivering the news. He feels like he's the most qualified person to be making you laugh and hopefully feel good for a brief moment of time. And so for us, thinking of ourselves as a respite while the rest of the world is, in turmoil is really important. And when we see messages come in or reviews of the podcast or whatever that say like, the best hour of my week is when I forget what's going on in the world and just like sit and laugh with my earbuds in, that's the stuff that like really makes us excited about coming to work every day.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, I think what's great about podcasts is you can listen to them at all times of day, and you can also sort of engage with the comedian in some way on a regular basis, presumably on social media. Do you do that? Is that something that happens?
We certainly do engage a little bit on Twitter and on Instagram. We also have a voicemail line, so listeners can call in and leave a voicemail, and we'll play it on the podcast, and and the hosts will respond, or Conan will. A lot of times there'll be people making fun of Conan, and he'll play the voicemail, and he'll respond to the people making fun of him. And so yes, it although it is a like one-way medium in the sense that it's not like Clubhouse where you're like chatting live in real time. It is a one-way medium. There is something very intimate obviously about podcasting. You're not just like welcoming someone on a screen in your living room. You're like putting them in your ears. You're like putting their voice in your brain. That makes it a very intimate experience, and you do feel like you develop a relationship with the host.
Yeah, that's great. And I also heard that you're consulting in some way with Higher Ground Productions. So tell us what that is. That sounds really fun.
Yeah, Higher Ground Productions is the production company for the Obamas, and I have been for the past almost 3 years. Been just an advisor, a strategic advisor on their audio side of their media endeavors, and so that's been primarily in partnership with Spotify. They've launched 2 podcasts so far. One was the Michelle Obama podcast, and then just yesterday, they launched a show called Renegades, Born in the USA, and that's a podcast where Barack Obama and Bruce Springsteen are doing an 8-part extended conversation that's recorded on a podcast, and and Springsteen plays music, and they chat about their lives and share personal stories. It's pretty cool.
Awesome. Yeah, that sounds really engaging. I'll definitely be looking into that. And now I wanted to pull up some of the photos and bring some into our conversation a little bit more. I think you have that slide, right? So, Adam, you have had a dash of comedy in the entrepreneurial journey of your own life. When you moved to India to bring love, essentially, or at least dating to Indian singles there a decade ago. And so, Somak, I wanted to ask you, when this idea came to the fore and Adam introduced himself to you and talked to you about the company, what were your impressions of Igniter? And did you run away with the idea? Well, you did in a sense, but
Yeah. Well, thank you, Pia, and thank you, Adam, for coming to our event. And I'm beaming with pride when I see all the things you're doing today. And I'm a huge fan, as Pia knows, of Conan O'Brien Needs a Friend. It has literally helped me survive the pandemic. I think I wake up sometimes at 4 a.m. I'm tired, and then I can't go to sleep, and I start hearing the podcast, and I'm just in stitches. So, in terms of Adam Sachs, like in terms of how I met, I remember that day pretty vividly. I remember that our team, and I was at Tribeca Venture Partners at the time, we were looking at some companies on AngelList, and we saw this interesting company, and we were discussing it at a Monday meeting. It was a company called Igniter. It apparently at that point was also approaching 1 million users, mostly organically in India, and focusing on the group dating space. So I just kind of perked up. I was like, what is this? And then I saw the CEO's name was Adam Sachs. And I assumed like Adam Sachs was an anglicized version of some Indian name like Anand Saxena or something like that, right? And so I came to our boardroom. I remember that coming to that meeting, and I see this tall, blonde-haired guy wearing, hipster clothes, and he greets me with this warm smile. And I first thought I walked into the wrong room. I was like, but he stopped me. He said, "No, hi, my name is Adam Sachs." And I remember having such an engaging meeting. And when he talked about the fact that he had just accidentally discovered upon India as a market, and that he was looking to potentially move to India and he wanted someone to help him join the journey, I was like, sign me up. This is fascinating, right? I mean, it was a crazy idea, but if it worked, it would be wildly successful, right? I also wanted to take a sidebar because actually Adam brought up an interesting point. He brought up Clubhouse, which is a different use case. Clubhouse obviously focuses more on sort of social podcasts, but as many of you may have read, like Clubhouse was at a little over 1 million users, maybe 2 million users by December, and it was valued at $1 billion. I imagine Adam, when I didn't lead that round, so someone else, but I don't think we were doing company valuations at $1 billion back then. But I remember just then, right after that meeting, I go to my partners. I'm like, we need to do this investment. And I brought it to my partners, and then I brought it to our managing partner of a PE fund, a very old school person named Bob Niehaus, who's an amazing investor. And I say, I'd like us to invest in this group dating website. And he looks at me and he says, group dating? He's like, is this like some sort of like polyamorous, like lifestyle type of company? Like, what are you talking about? And you sure you want this to be one of your first investments you're leading as a partner? I'm like, I'm absolutely convinced, right? And it was just something that Adam and I really were riffing the minute we met each other. As a person who grew up in America in the 80s, I could relate to the pain point of dating being an awkward topic to broach with your parents. And I think I have some family members here who are, I guess I really appreciate that you guys were great parents, but I think in general, like it was very difficult to tell people that, hey, I'm going to go on a date with Sarah or Molly or whoever it is. And, and we need remove some of the awkwardness. So it was an amazing experience, and I'm so grateful we were able to be part of that story.
Yeah, and it seems this was your first trip to India, right? When you went there for Igniter, or no?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. It was my first trip. I mean, we were like well underway with having quote unquote pivoted our strategy to being focused on India long before I had ever even been there. It wasn't until I had Somak as sort of a guide and companion to go with me on that first trip that was when I finally mustered up the courage to go.
And so how much did you end up raising through the company's life cycle?
Through the company's life cycle, we raised, I would say, about $4.5 million or so. And no, we never hit Clubhouse valuations, unfortunately.
Well, I wanted to just a quick interrupt. I'm sorry, but I wanted to just talk about just something else. I just kind of having this flood of memories. And I guess, Adam, I'm sorry if I'm embarrassing you with the story, but I do remember this evening, as we're talking about India and we're looking at these pictures, I remember we spent that week together and we were trying to find, I think it was like your COO president, right? Mm-hmm. And I remember I was like, Adam, we've got an important dinner engagement. We're going to meet some people who are business leaders and the press. And I remember coming to your room, and I just remember you weren't dressed. I was like, Adam, put your clothes on. We got to go, right? Your face was flushed white. I was like, Adam, what are you doing? The car is waiting outside. We got to go to this event. And you're like, Somak, I can't make it tonight. I was like, well, what do you mean? What do you mean you can't make it tonight? And I was just like, I can't make it. I'm really sorry. And I guess would you mind telling the audience why you couldn't make that event that evening?
Yeah, I mean, the euphemism is deli belly, but I got very sick on that trip. It's funny. There's a picture of you getting a suit made. We went to get suits made in Delhi, and I remember getting so sick that every time I would go back to get measured, it's like a 3-step process getting your suit made. They kept having to make the suit smaller because I was so sick. I took all of the antibiotics that my travel doctor from New York gave me, and none of them worked. And honestly, I was like, at one point, I was getting nervous. I don't know how I'm going to ever fly home. I'm like, I can't. I could barely leave the hotel room. And then Pia's family, the Chada family, Ashwin and his family, they had become like my guardian angels over there. And so they finally sent their family doctor to come to my hotel room. This was the first, at least the only time I'm aware of getting a shot in my rear end. And it was and within a few hours, I was completely better. It was like whatever he gave me, I don't know what it was a miracle.
I want to confess something here, Adam, that I have used this story potentially with some entrepreneurs when I've been trying to win investments, and when they say, "Oh, we could raise money from anyone, right?" We have other funds who said they're going to raise capital or help us find talent. I was like, "Yeah, but are they going to ask you if your stomach is okay, and are they going to help save your life?" Like, because then they're like, it's like Andreessen Horowitz, Sequoia, and Army Sport. No, you're right. Saving life is important too. But I think that I'm so grateful that Adam survived that. That would have really sucked if he had not if he had come to Delhi Belly. But he did turn around. I just want to mention one more funny story if I could, because there's so many things that I remember. We can talk more later after this event. But I remember that there was, as a board member, I think we had one concern about just these, the fact that that women were signing up to this website, but they kept leaving. And then I think I might have one of the board members that said, Adam, could you just get us some anonymized data about, what kind of messages people are sending? And we just found some very bizarre messages that these guys were sending, and we were cringing. And maybe would you mind sharing a little bit about that if you remember that part?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it that we did finally start to read a bunch of the messages to understand. We probably should have done it even sooner, but eventually we started to read a bunch of the messages. And yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it comes down to the fact that there is not really, and this is part of the reason that we were successful at that point, is there wasn't an established dating culture in India. And there weren't dating sites either. The popular matchmaking websites at the time were Shadi.com and Bharat Matrimony, which were matrimony websites. It was websites where parents would sign up and create profiles for their children and message with other parents. But there weren't dating sites. And I think one of the things that made us successful is we didn't brand ourselves as a dating site. We branded ourselves as a site for meeting new people. And inherent in that is that yes, we were helping you connect with dates. But I think the fact that maybe there wasn't a long history of dating culture there made it so that I think some of the the rules for behavior, or sort of the standards for how you would message with somebody else, on a dating site, were just like they weren't always there. So yes, we would cringe at times when we would read some of these messages, and it was understandable why women would run away.
And I think there's just
I just had a follow-up question to that, which was that, dating was very different in India 10 years ago. Today, everyone has a smartphone. The internet is ubiquitous. And so do you feel as though if you started the company now that it would have become just an even larger company? I mean, many more users. How do you think the environment has changed?
I do. I think if anything, we were on the early side. I know Tinder is big in India now. We sort of predated mobile even. I mean, there were mobile apps being developed in the US, but at the time, just there wasn't enough real broadband capabilities across the country, so that it was really hard to get mobile users. There wasn't a lot of smartphone penetration even then. And so, yes, I think today, I do think it would be a little bit easier. And I think from a technology standpoint and from a cultural standpoint.
Yeah. And I think that you sort of transitioned, you mentioned earlier in our talk with you that you transitioned to podcasting essentially through the Igniter experience. So how did that happen?
And could you maybe just, so we have, I know it's a way go into, but could you also just tell us a bit about just sort of some lessons learned about
Yes.
about that experience,
Podcasting.
about podcasting, like things that you know, in just a brief, maybe time we have, about what you suggest people should think about when they're trying to build brand through podcasting?
Yeah. So yes, to answer Pia's first question, I was alone. I spent the better part of 2 years in India, and probably my most steady companion there were podcasts. And so I would, be on these long flights from New York City to Delhi, and I'd be listening to podcasts, and then I'd be in my room in India, and I'd have a podcast playing at all times. So I became obsessed with the medium, and this was, early days in the medium. But I became just obsessed with the power of podcasts then. And after we sold the company to Match, I knew somebody who had started a podcast company. It was a comedy podcast network, and he wanted to build an ad network on top of it. And there really wasn't anything like that existed at the time. And so I joined him, and I became CEO of this podcast company called Midroll, which is now better known as Stitcher. And that was a really cool journey. It was very different. Very, very different, obviously, from my group dating journey. We were bootstrapped all the way through. We never raised money, and we sold to a company called Scripps in 2015. In terms of what was your question? Lessons learned about
podcasting? I guess maybe we have a lot of entrepreneurs and investors in our audience, and could you talk a bit about? There's so many questions we want to ask you, Adam, but we're so pressed for time. I wish we could have more time. Just want to understand a little bit more about what are there one or two nuggets of wisdom that you could impart to our audience about when you're trying to build a brand or reach people through a podcasting medium? What are some things to think about?
Well, first of all, it's on the one hand, it is very, very early days in the medium. I still think it's like, second or third inning. There's so much to be developed, both in terms of interesting formats on the creative side, but also on the business side as well. Like there are, over 1 million podcasts out there today, literally well over 1 million podcasts, and probably 1% of them are being monetized well today. And there are technology platforms that are popping up to help, that long tail of podcasters reach a bigger audience and make more money. But I still think no one's really cracked that yet. So to me, there's a lot of opportunity on the business side. And then in terms of formats, while it's still early days, it's very saturated. There are no barriers to entry to creating a podcast. Anybody can create one just with their laptop, which means basically everybody has. And so it's important to be thoughtful about the fact that although it's easy to create a podcast, what is different about yours that helps you reach an audience? Whether it's easy when you've got someone like Conan to be your differentiator, because he's very, very famous and very, very talented. But if you don't have somebody like Conan, what is different about you or your perspective that nobody else has? How can you find an area that feels unique, so that it's not just the days of, I think, two dudes in a garage chatting and having a successful podcast are just are over. There's just too much saturation there. So figuring out what you can do differently that no one else can do, and what your unique take is going to be, I think is really important.
That makes so much
That
sense.
makes a lot of sense. Thank you again, Adam, for joining us. I think this is the first time that we've had you on at one of our meetings, and it's such a joy always to catch up with you and to hear, how you've transformed this group dating experience brought it into another realm. It's really, really cool. Thank you again.
Yeah, and I also want to thank you, Adam. We're so proud of what how your career has evolved over the past few decades, and we're looking forward to finding other things in touch. And if, as I think I mentioned to you in text, if you end up doing a show in India, I'm happy to be your expert. Happy to come to India with you. We had so much fun, and hope to relive the days once again. Yeah.
That sounds great. Thank you both. You guys have both been so supportive for so long, and I'm big fans of both of you. So thanks for having me.